In the village of Umidike, names were never just names. They were labels, judgments, and sometimes curses passed from mouth to mouth like gossip wrapped in truth. By the time Amara turned 19, most people no longer called her by her given name. She was simply that orphan, Ngozi's burden, the fat girl who eats too much. Umidike was small, the kind of village where everyone knew the sound of everyone else's footsteps. Red earth roads cut through rows of mud houses with rusted zinc roofs. Palm trees stood like silent witnesses, their leaves whispering secrets in the wind. Life here was simple, but cruelty found ways to grow even in simplicity. Amara had been born into love once. She barely remembered it, but fragments remained. Her mother's laughter, soft and musical, and her father's deep voice humming old songs in the evenings. Her mother died bringing her younger brother into the world, and the baby followed shortly after. Her father tried to be strong, but grief hollowed him out. Malaria finished what sorrow had started. At 6 years old, Amara became an orphan. She was taken in by her mother's elder sister, Aunt Ngozi, not out of love but obligation. The day Amara arrived at her aunt's compound, holding a small nylon bag with all she owned, Ngozi stood with her arms folded, lips tight. "She eats a lot," Ngozi muttered to her husband, Uncle Felix, as though the child could not hear. That was the first wound. From that day, Amara learned what it meant to exist without belonging. She did not sleep inside the main room like her cousins. Her bed was a thin raffia mat laid beside the kitchen hearth, where smoke clung to her clothes and stung her eyes even in sleep. She woke before the cock crowed, often to the sharp kick of Aunt Ngozi's foot. "Are you dead? Wake up!" At dawn, Amara fetched water from the stream, balanced heavy buckets on her head while her arms trembled. She swept the compound until her palms blistered. She cooked, washed, farmed, and served, always last, always watched. If food finished before she ate, it was her fault for being greedy. "Look at her body," Aunt Ngozi would say loudly whenever neighbors visited. "She eats like 5 people. And for what? No beauty, no sense." The women would laugh, some with pity, most with relief that the burden was not theirs. Amara grew fast, not tall but wide. Her body filled out early, soft and heavy, a result of inconsistent meals and hard labor. She tried to make herself smaller, but no matter how little she ate, the insults never stopped. Even when she went hungry, she was accused of overeating. Uncle Felix enjoyed humiliating her the most. "If you were a goat, at least we could sell you," he would say, sipping palm wine while Amara knelt to serve him. "Who will marry this thing? Even blind men have eyes in their dreams." The words sank deep. Amara stopped looking at her reflection in water. She stopped imagining a future. Dreams felt like dangerous things, they made disappointment sharper. School had once been her escape. She loved books, loved how letters formed worlds kinder than hers. But when her cousins advanced, Amara stayed behind. School fees were suddenly too much, yet she was still useful enough to work the farm. "Education won't change her fate," Aunt Ngozi declared. "She will end up in someone's kitchen anyway." So Amara stayed. Days blended into each other. Dust, sweat, insults, silence. The only moments of peace came at night when the compound slept. Amara would lie on her mat, staring at the ceiling blackened by smoke, whispering prayers she wasn't sure anyone heard. "God, please don't forget me." Sometimes she cried quietly, pressing her fist into her mouth so no one would hear. Crying openly only brought more punishment. Despite everything, Amara was gentle. Pain had not hardened her. When her cousins fell sick, she sat by them. When neighbors needed help, she offered it. Kindness flowed from her naturally, even though she received none in return. Confused people. "Why is she still humble?" one woman once asked. Aunt Ngozi shrugged. "Stupidity." But kindness was the only thing Amara truly owned, and she guarded it fiercely. At 19, Amara had never known love. She had never been courted, never admired, never asked what she wanted. Men looked at her either with mockery or hunger, but never respect. The village had already decided her story. She will end up anywhere, they said. Just not anywhere good. On the morning everything began to tilt toward disaster. Amara woke earlier than usual. Her aunt was already shouting, "The cassava needs harvesting. Move!" Amara washed her face with cold water, tied her faded wrapper, and went to the farm. As she worked, sweat trickled down her back, her thoughts drifting as they often did. She wondered what life might have been like if her parents had lived, if someone had ever protected her, if she mattered. She did not know that fate had already marked her. When she returned home that evening, tired and aching, Aunt Ngozi watched her with strange intensity. There was calculation in her eyes, not anger. Amara felt it but didn't understand it. She only knew one thing as she lay down that night, exhaustion pressing her into the mat. Her life had never truly been hers, and soon it would be taken from her in a way she could never have imagined. The rain began in the late afternoon, slow at first, then furious, as though the sky itself had grown angry. Thick clouds swallowed the sun, plunging Umudike into a gray, restless dusk. Thunder rolled in the distance, low and warning, but no one paid it much attention. Rain was not new to the village. Pain, too, had become ordinary. Amara stood in the kitchen, stirring a thin pot of soup over the fire. Her arms ached from farm work, her feet throbbed, and her stomach growled softly. She had eaten nothing since morning. Still, she focused on the pot, careful not to spill anything. Any mistake today would earn her insults or worse. Aunt Ngozi entered, her wrapper tied tight, her face already hardened with irritation. "The water pots are empty," she snapped. "Go to the stream." Amara hesitated. She glanced toward the sky. Rain was falling harder now, drumming against the zinc roof. "Auntie, it's raining," she said quietly. "Maybe I can go when it slows." Ngozi's eyes flashed. "So rain will kill you? Or you think you are too important to obey instructions?" Amara swallowed. "No, Auntie." She reached for the empty buckets. Uncle Felix's laughter drifted in from the sitting area where he lounged with his friends, palm wine cup in hand. "Let her go," he said mockingly. "Water won't melt her fat." The men laughed. Amara lowered her head and stepped outside. The rain soaked her wrapper within seconds. Mud clung to her feet as she walked the narrow path leading to the stream. Trees bent under the weight of the downpour, their leaves thrashing violently. The world felt smaller, darker, more dangerous. A voice inside her whispered that she should turn back. She ignored it. The stream was swollen, water rushing faster than usual. Amara filled her buckets quickly, her hands shaking from cold and fear. Thunder cracked overhead, making her flinch. She balanced one bucket on her head and lifted the other with effort. That was when she heard footsteps behind her. At first, "Sorry," she murmured. The footsteps stopped. Then hands grabbed her from behind. Amara gasped, the bucket falling from her head and splashing violently into the mud. She struggled, slipping, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear her own screams over the rain. "Please," she cried. "Please let me go." The man's grip tightened. His breath was hot and sour near her ear. He dragged her toward the bushes, away from the path, away from the world. "No one will hear you," he muttered. Amara fought with everything in her, scratching, kicking, biting, but fear drained her strength. The rain swallowed her cries. The trees stood silent. When it was over, the world felt unreal. The man vanished into the rain without a word, leaving Amara curled in the mud, shaking violently. Her wrapper was torn. Her body felt foreign, broken. She tried to stand but collapsed again, nausea rising in her throat. The sky kept pouring as though nothing had happened. After a long time, she didn't know how long, Amara forced herself up. She gathered the buckets with trembling hands and stumbled home, each step heavier than the last. She did not cry anymore. It was as though something inside her had gone numb. When she reached the compound, Aunt Ngozi was waiting. "What took you so long?" she barked. "Are you sleeping on the road?" Amara dropped the buckets and sank to her knees. "Auntie," her voice cracked. "Something happened." Ngozi frowned. annoyed. What nonsense is this? Amara tried to speak, but the words tangled in her mouth. When she finally managed, they came out broken. A man? At the stream. Ngozi stared at her, then slowly looked her up and down. Her eyes narrowed, sharp with suspicion, not concern. So you were roaming around with men? No, Amara cried. I was attacked. I tried to. Ngozi slapped her. The sound echoed across the compound. You shameless girl, she hissed. Do you think I was born yesterday? Always opening your legs and coming to lie. Amara clutched her cheek, stunned. Uncle Felix appeared, drawn by the noise. What is it? She says a man touched her. Ngozi scoffed. This one that cannot even control herself. Felix snorted. Look at her body. Men have been looking at her since. Amara felt the ground tilt beneath her. I'm telling the truth, she whispered desperately. Please, I didn't want it. Ngozi leaned close, her voice low and dangerous. Listen to me carefully. If you open your dirty mouth to anyone, I will send you away with nothing. You will beg on the streets. Amara nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. That night, she did not sleep. Her body ached in ways she could not understand. Her mind replayed everything in fragments: hands, rain, fear. She scrubbed herself with water until her skin burned, but she still felt unclean. Days passed. Amara grew quiet, quieter than before. She avoided the stream. She flinched at sudden sounds. At night, she woke from nightmares, gasping for breath. No one noticed, or no one cared. Weeks later, her body began to change. First, she thought it was sickness. Her stomach churned in the mornings. Certain smells made her gag. She felt dizzy while working. Aunt Ngozi accused her of pretending. You just don't want to work, she snapped. Then Amara missed her monthly flow. Fear settled deep in her chest. She counted days, then weeks. Panic wrapped around her like a rope. When her belly began to feel different, tighter, fuller, she knew she was pregnant. The realization shattered what little strength she had left. She cried alone in the kitchen that night, her tears falling silently into the ashes. God no. When she finally told Aunt Ngozi, the reaction was swift and merciless. Ngozi screamed so loudly neighbors gathered outside the compound. You evil thing, she shouted, pacing wildly. You have brought disgrace into my house. Amara knelt, sobbing. Please, Auntie, I didn't plan it. Ngozi raised her hand again, but this time stopped herself. Her anger shifted into something colder. So this is how you repay us, she said slowly. After feeding you. Uncle Felix's face darkened when he heard. Who is responsible? He demanded. Amara shook her head. I don't know him. Felix laughed bitterly. So you opened your legs for a ghost? That night, Amara overheard them talking. She is useless now, Ngozi said. No man will marry her. There is that madman near the old road, Felix replied. His people might take her. Ngozi went quiet. Then she smiled. Amara pressed her back against the wall, her heart pounding with terror. She did not yet know what that decision would mean, but she felt her future closing in on her like darkness before dawn. And the village, once again, would not save her. The news did not come to Amara in one loud announcement. It crept toward her in whispers, in stolen glances, in the way her aunt suddenly watched her with narrowed eyes, as though calculating the weight of a sack of grain she intended to sell. After the day Aunt Ngozi discovered the pregnancy, Amara's life changed again, somehow becoming even smaller. She was no longer shouted at endlessly. Instead, silence followed her. A heavy, deliberate silence that pressed on her chest harder than insults ever had. Her aunt stopped calling her name. Uncle Felix no longer joked about her body. When Amara entered a room, conversations stopped. She had become a problem that required solving. Her pregnancy was no longer hidden. The slight swelling of her belly betrayed her no matter how tightly she tied her wrapper. Women in the village began to stare openly now, their eyes sharp with judgment. Some shook their heads in pity. Others smirked. She couldn't even wait to disgrace herself properly, one woman whispered as Amara passed. Amara kept walking, her eyes on the ground. At home, Aunt Ngozi stopped letting her eat with the rest of the household. Amara's meals were pushed to her late at night, cold, meager portions placed on the floor without a word. She was still made to work from dawn to dusk, despite the dizziness and constant nausea. You got pregnant by force? Ngozi snapped one morning as Amara struggled to lift a basin of cassava. Did pregnancy stop women before from working? Amara bit her lip and said nothing. At night, fear sat with her like a second shadow. She sensed something approaching, something dark and final. She did not know what form it would take, but she felt it in her bones. The confirmation came one evening when Aunt Ngozi called her into the sitting area. Amara wiped her hands on her wrapper and entered slowly. Uncle Felix sat on a wooden chair, his expression unreadable. A lantern flickered between them, casting long shadows on the wall. "Kneel," Ngozi said. Amara obeyed. "We have decided what to do with you," Ngozi began, her voice calm in a way that terrified Amara more than shouting ever had. Amara's heart thudded painfully. "Auntie, please, keep quiet," Felix interrupted. "This is not a discussion." Ngozi folded her arms. "You have disgraced this family. You are pregnant without a husband. No decent man will take you." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "I didn't plan it. I was attacked." Ngozi slammed her palm against the table. "Enough of that lie. Even if it were true, what difference does it make? Shame is shame." Amara stared at them in horror. "You want to give me to a madman?" Ngozi shrugged. "At least he will not complain about your body, or your condition." Amara fell forward, clutching Ngozi's legs. "Please, Auntie, I will work harder. I will leave the village. I will beg, anything." Ngozi pushed her away with her foot. "Stand up. Don't touch me." Amara collapsed back onto her knees, sobbing openly now. Felix stood. "The arrangement is already made. You will go tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind like a death sentence. That night, Amara did not sleep. She sat on her mat, rocking gently, her hands wrapped around her belly, as if she could protect the life growing inside her. "God, I am scared," she prayed silently. "If you are still there, don't abandon me now." Morning came too quickly. Before sunrise, Aunt Ngozi thrust a small bundle of clothes into Amara's arms. "That is all you need," she said. "You came with nothing. You will leave with nothing." Amara looked around the compound, the place where she had suffered for over a decade. There was no farewell, no regret, no pity, only relief. 2 men from the madman's family arrived shortly after. They were quiet, their expressions weary, as though shame had long since exhausted them. They did not look at Amara for too long. The walk to the old road felt endless. Villagers paused to watch. Some whispered openly, "So it's true. They are giving her to that one. At least it suits her." Amara's legs felt weak, but she kept moving. Stopping would only prolong the humiliation. When they reached the small, neglected hut by the roadside, Amara's breath caught in her throat. The structure leaned slightly, its walls cracked, weeds growing wildly around it. The door hung crooked on one hinge. This was where she would live. One of the men knocked softly. A moment passed. Then the door opened. The man who stood there did not look dangerous. He looked lost. He was tall but thin, his clothes clean but worn. His hair was unkempt, his eyes distant, unfocused. He stared past Amara rather than at her, murmuring under his breath. They said you would come," he whispered, not clearly to anyone. This was the madman. Amara's chest tightened with fear and confusion. This was not the violent creature she had imagined. "Her name is Amara," one of the men said awkwardly. "She is your wife now." The man blinked slowly. "My wife?" he repeated as though tasting the word. Amara stood frozen, her heart pounding. "She is pregnant," the other man added quickly as though ripping off a bandage. "The child is not yours." The man's brow furrowed. For a terrifying moment, Amara thought he might explode. but instead he simply nodded. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay." That was all. The men left shortly after, barely able to meet Amara's eyes. When they were gone, silence settled over the hut. Amara stood at the doorway, unsure what to do. I can clean," she said finally, her voice shaking. The man looked at her properly for the first time. His gaze lingered on her face, then dropped respectfully. "You can sit," he said. "You look tired." No one had said that to her before. She sat slowly. Fear still coiled in her stomach, but something else stirred beneath it. Confusion. Curiosity. As night fell and the lantern flickered on, Amara realized something unexpected. She had been sent here to be punished, but she was not being hurt. And in the quiet presence of the man everyone called mad, Amara felt, perhaps for the first time, not in danger. She did not yet know that this place, born of cruelty, would become the ground where her life would begin again. The first night Amara spent in the roadside hut passed in silence, so complete it felt unreal. She sat on a low wooden stool near the wall, her small bundle of clothes at her feet, her hands resting protectively on her belly. The lantern on the floor flickered softly, casting trembling shadows that danced across the cracked mud walls. Outside, insects hummed, and the distant sound of night birds drifted through the open window. The man, her husband, though the word felt heavy and strange, sat on the opposite side of the room. He had not spoken since offering her a seat. He stared at the floor, occasionally rocking slightly, his fingers moving as if counting invisible things. Amara watched him from the corner of her eye. This was the madman they feared. Yet he had not shouted, had not touched her, had not even looked at her with the hunger or contempt she had grown used to. Her body remained tense, ready to flee at the slightest sign of danger. Years of abuse had taught her that calm was often a trick, a pause before pain. When the silence stretched too long, Amara cleared her throat softly. "Sir, should I cook?" she asked. The man startled, as though he had forgotten she was there. He lifted his head slowly and looked around, then met her eyes. "You don't have to call me that," he said. His voice was quiet, uneven, but not harsh. "My name is Daniel." She nodded quickly. "Okay, Daniel." The name sounded ordinary. Too ordinary for someone the village had painted as a monster. "There is food outside," he added, pointing toward a small pot near the hearth. "I made yam earlier. You can eat first." Amara's stomach twisted, not with hunger, but confusion. "Me?" she asked. Daniel frowned slightly. "Yes, you." She hesitated, waiting for the insult that usually followed. It didn't come. Slowly, cautiously, she stood and moved toward the pot. The food was simple, boiled yam slightly overcooked, but it was warm. She ate in small bites, expecting at any moment to be told she was eating too much. Nothing happened. Daniel turned his face away, giving her privacy. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." He nodded once, as though unsure what to do with the gratitude. That night, Daniel lay on a mat near the door. Amara slept closer to the hearth. There was space between them, physical and emotional, and Amara clung to it like a shield. Still, sleep did not come easily. Every sound made her flinch. Every shift of Daniel's body tightened her muscles. She woke repeatedly, heart racing, only to find him still lying quietly, staring at the ceiling or murmuring words she could not understand. By morning, she was exhausted, but something felt different. She realized it just as the sun rose through the window. No one had screamed at her. The realization hit her harder than any slap ever had. Morning routines formed slowly, awkwardly. Amara woke early out of habit, swept the hut, fetched water from a closer well Daniel showed her, one she had never been allowed to use before. When she returned, Daniel was sitting outside, watching the road as if expecting someone who never came. "I can cook," she said, unsure if she was overstepping. He nodded. "If you want." Those words, "if you want," settled strangely in her chest. Days passed. Daniel did not leave the hut often. Sometimes he spoke to himself, his voice rising and falling in broken sentences. Other times he was perfectly lucid, asking Amara how she slept, whether her body hurt, if the baby moved. He never touched her without permission. In fact, he kept his distance, as though afraid of frightening her. One afternoon, Amara's legs gave way while she was washing clothes. Pain tore through her lower back, sharp and sudden. She cried out before she could stop herself. Daniel was at her side instantly. "What's wrong?" he asked, panic flashing across his face. "My back. It hurts," she gasped. Without hesitation, he supported her, guiding her gently to sit on a stool. He fetched water, dabbed her face with a cloth, and knelt in front of her, his hands hovering uncertainly. "Can I touch you?" he asked. Amara froze. Then slowly she nodded. His hands were warm, careful as he rubbed her lower back, murmuring softly. The pain eased, not completely, but enough for her to breathe again. "Thank you," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. He looked startled. "I didn't do much." "You did," she said firmly. That night, something shifted inside Amara. She realized she was not surviving here. She was being cared for. As her pregnancy progressed, Daniel became more attentive. He fetched herbs from an old woman who lived nearby. He learned which foods made Amara nauseous and avoided them. When nightmares woke her shaking, he would sit nearby, not touching, just present. "You're safe," he would say quietly. "Nothing will happen to you here." First, she didn't believe him, but the days kept proving him right. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the roof, Amara found Daniel sitting alone, his head in his hands. "Are you okay?" she asked. He looked up, eyes clouded. "Sometimes, my head feels noisy," he admitted, "like too many thoughts shouting." Amara hesitated, then did something she had never done before. She sat beside him. "It's okay," she said softly. "You don't have to fight them alone." He stared at her, something like wonder flickering across his face. "You're not afraid of me?" he asked. She thought of the cruelty she had survived, of the people who had truly hurt her. "No," she said honestly. "I think you're kind." Daniel swallowed hard and turned away. That night he cried, quietly, silently, as though ashamed of the sound. Amara did not say anything. She simply stayed beside him, her presence steady. From that moment, Daniel began to change. The murmurs reduced. His eyes grew clearer. His sentences stretched longer, more complete. He started asking about Amara's past, about her parents, about what she liked. "No one has ever asked me that," she admitted once. He frowned. "That's not right." As weeks turned into months, the hut no longer felt like a prison. It became a refuge. Amara laughed for the first time in years when Daniel tried to cook and burn the yam completely. "You're smiling," he said, surprised. She touched her face, startled by the truth of it. "Yes, I am." The villagers noticed the change from afar. Whispers followed them when Amara went to the market with Daniel. "The madman looks normal now. That woman is strange." But Amara no longer shrank under their stares. For the first time in her life, she felt human. She did not know it yet, but love, real love, had begun its quiet work, healing wounds medicine never could. And in that small hut by the roadside, two broken people were slowly learning how to be whole. Change did not announce itself loudly in the hut by the old road. It arrived softly, the way dawn crept into Umudike, slow, almost shy, but impossible to stop once it began. Amara noticed it first in the mornings. Daniel used to wake confused, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something he had lost in the night. Some mornings he spoke nonsense words, fragments of thoughts tangled together. Other mornings he barely spoke at all. But gradually those mornings became fewer. Now, when Amara stirred the fire at dawn, Daniel would sit up on his mat and greet her. "Good morning, Amara," he would say, his voice still rough with sleep but clear. Each time he said her name, something warm spread through her chest. She had spent most of her life being called insults instead of her name. Hearing it spoken gently felt like reclaiming a stolen piece of herself. Amara's pregnancy advanced, bringing with it new aches and unexpected fears. Her back hurt more often. Her feet swelled by evening. Sometimes sharp pains struck without warning, stealing her breath and leaving her clutching her belly in panic. Each time Daniel was there. When she woke at night sweating from nightmares, he would sit beside her mat, not touching unless she asked. "You're safe," he reminded her. "You're not alone." At first, Amara believed he said it for her sake. Later, she realized he needed to believe it too. One afternoon, the pain came harder than usual. Amara was washing plates when a sudden cramp seized her abdomen. She cried out, the bowl slipping from her hands and shattering on the ground. Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the floor, clutching her belly in terror. Daniel rushed in, his face pale. "What is it? What's wrong?" he asked, his voice shaking. "My stomach. It hurts," she gasped. "The baby." Fear seized him. His hands trembled as he knelt in front of her. "Look at me," he said urgently. "Breathe with me." Slowly, she followed his lead, matching her breath to his. Slowly, the pain eased, leaving behind exhaustion and tears. Daniel exhaled deeply, relief flooding his face. "I thought I was losing you," he whispered. Amara stared at him. "Losing you." No one had ever spoken about her presence as something valuable before. "It's okay," she said softly. "The baby is fine." Daniel nodded, but his eyes were wet. That evening he cooked without being asked. He burned the first pot of soup and apologized repeatedly, flustered and embarrassed. Amara laughed. A real laugh, full and warm. "It's okay," she said, touching his arm gently. "I'll help." They stood side by side in the small kitchen space, bumping into each other awkwardly, laughing when the spoon fell or the fire flared too high. For a moment, Amara forgot her past, forgot the cruelty, forgot the shame. She felt normal. Days turned into weeks, and Daniel's transformation became impossible to ignore. He stopped talking to himself as often. His thoughts no longer drifted mid-sentence. He remembered things, small things at first, then larger ones. He remembered songs his mother used to sing. He remembered the smell of rain on hot roads. Sometimes he would stop suddenly, holding his head, overwhelmed by flashes of memory. Amara was always there. She listened without judgment. She never told him to be strong or stop thinking. She simply listened, her presence steady and reassuring. "You don't have to rush," she told him once when he grew frustrated with himself. "Healing takes time." He looked at her, stunned. "People usually get angry with me when I don't heal fast enough," he admitted quietly. "Well," she said gently, "I'm not people." Something shifted between them then, something deeper than gratitude. One evening, rain poured steadily outside, trapping them indoors. The air was cool, and the lantern cast a soft glow around the room. Daniel sat across from Amara, watching her as she mended a tear in her wrapper. "You're very patient," he said suddenly. Amara shrugged. "I had to be." "Why?" he asked. She hesitated. Talking about her past still felt like reopening old wounds. But Daniel's gaze was kind, not demanding. So she told him. She told him about her parents, about her aunt and uncle, about sleeping beside the kitchen fire. She told him about the insults, the hunger, the loneliness. Her voice shook when she spoke of the night at the stream, but Daniel listened without interrupting, his fists clenched tightly in his lap. When she finished, silence filled the room. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "I wish I could erase it." "You didn't do it," she replied. "I know," he said, "but I wish someone had protected you." Amara's eyes burned with tears. "No one ever did," she whispered. Daniel moved without thinking. He reached for her hand, then froze. "May I?" he asked softly. Amara nodded. His hand enveloped hers, warm and steady. "I can't change what happened," he said, "but I promise you something. As long as you're here, no one will hurt you again. Not ever." Amara believed him. That night, she dreamed of light instead of darkness. As Daniel grew stronger, villagers began to notice. When he accompanied Amara to the market, people stared openly. Some whispered behind their hands. Others pretended not to see. "That madman is talking properly now," someone muttered. "It's that woman," another said. "She did something to him." Amara heard the whispers but no longer let them shrink her. She walked with her head high, Daniel's quiet presence beside her like a shield. One day an old woman stopped them. "You have calmed him," she said to Amara bluntly. "Whatever you are doing, don't stop." Daniel looked confused. "Was I really that bad?" Amara squeezed his hand. "You were hurting," she said. "That's all." That night, Daniel sat alone for a long time, staring at the road. When Amara joined him, he spoke quietly. "Before everything broke," he said, "I think I used to be someone important." Amara frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I don't remember clearly," he admitted. "But sometimes I feel like I lost a life, like something was taken from me." Amara listened carefully. "Maybe," she said, "it will come back when you're ready." He nodded. Love settled between them not as fire, but as warmth. Steady, reliable, healing. Amara realized one evening, as she watched Daniel laugh freely for the first time, that she had stopped feeling ashamed of herself. Her body, her past, her pregnancy. She was loved. Not despite her scars, but alongside them. And Daniel, once called mad, was becoming whole. Neither of them knew that the world beyond the village was already stirring, that the past Daniel had forgotten was preparing to find him. But for now, in the small hut by the road, love had done what cruelty never could. It had brought two broken souls back to life. The first sign that their fragile peace was about to shatter came on a morning that looked completely ordinary. The sun rose gently over the old road, spilling light across the hut and warming the damp earth from the night's rain. Amara stood outside, pounding dried pepper in a small mortar, her movements slow and careful now that her belly had grown round and heavy. Daniel sat nearby on a wooden stool, repairing a broken basket with surprising patience. They had settled into this rhythm so naturally that Amara barely remembered what life had been before it. Before silence meant fear, before every raised voice sent her heart racing. Daniel hummed softly as he worked. It was an old tune, one he didn't fully remember learning, but it came to him easily, like something buried deep in his bones. Amara smiled faintly. "You always hum that song," she said. Daniel paused, confused. "I do." "Yes," she replied, "especially when you're calm." He thought about it, then shook his head. "I don't know where it comes from." "Maybe it's from before," Amara said gently. Daniel's hands stilled. That word, before, had become both a promise and a threat. There were days when fragments of memory surfaced like broken glass. A large house, echoing hallways, voices speaking quickly in accents he could almost recognize. Other days, his mind felt blissfully blank. Before he could respond, a distant sound cut through the morning air. An engine. Amara frowned. Cars rarely passed the old road, and when they did, they were battered vehicles coughing smoke. The sound was different, smooth, powerful. Daniel stood slowly. The sound grew louder. Then the car appeared. It was black, sleek, shining unnaturally against the dust and poverty of Umudike. It rolled forward with quiet authority and stopped a few meters from the hut. Amara's heart skipped. Nothing good ever arrived in a car like that. The door opened, and a man stepped out. Elderly, tall, dressed in a crisp outfit that spoke of wealth and control. His hair was gray at the temples, his face lined not with weakness but with years of command. Two younger men followed him, standing a respectful distance behind. The elderly man's eyes locked onto Daniel. He went completely still. The mortar slipped from Amara's hands and hit the ground with a dull thud. The man took a single step forward, his breath catching in his throat. "My son," he whispered. The word seemed to split the air. Daniel staggered back as if struck. His hands flew to his head, his breathing quickening. "No," he muttered. "No, no, no." Images crashed into him without mercy. A grand house, a woman screaming his name, Men dragging him. Needles. Darkness. Betrayal. Daniel dropped to his knees with a cry that tore straight from his chest. Amara rushed to him instantly, kneeling beside him, gripping his shoulders. Daniel, look at me. Breathe, please. The elderly man hurried forward but stopped when Amara shot him a sharp, protective look. Who are you? She demanded. The man's eyes filled with tears. I am his father. Daniel let out a broken laugh. I don't have a father, he said hoarsely. I was abandoned, left to rot. No, the man said firmly. You were stolen. Silence fell, heavy and unbearable. Amara felt her hands trembling as she held Daniel. What is he talking about? She asked quietly. The man exhaled deeply, grief carving deeper lines into his face. My name doesn't matter, he said. What matters is that Daniel is not mad. He never was. Daniel looked up sharply. Then why does my head? They drugged you, the man interrupted. For years. Amara gasped. The man continued, voice thick with regret. Daniel was the heir to everything I built. Smart, strong, kind, too trusting. Some people wanted him gone so they could take control. They arranged an accident, declared him unstable, and hid him where they thought no one would ever look. Daniel shook violently. You knew, he accused. You knew I was alive. I searched, the man said, tears finally spilling. For years, but they covered their tracks well. When I finally found you, you were already broken. Amara felt anger rise in her chest like fire. So you left him like this? She snapped. You left him here to suffer? The man bowed his head. I was afraid that bringing him back too soon would kill him. Afraid of what they might do to him again. Daniel laughed bitterly. So you chose to lose me instead. The words hung between them like a wound. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Daniel swayed. Amara caught him just in time. That's enough, she said firmly. Whatever this is, it can wait. He needs rest. The man nodded quickly. Of course. I'll arrange doctors. Proper doctors. No, Amara said, surprising even herself. Not yet. All eyes turned to her. You don't take him anywhere without his consent, she said. This place saved him. I saved him. The man studied her, really looked at her for the first time. You are his wife? He asked. Amara lifted her chin. Yes. And the child? Mine, she said calmly. And his. Something shifted in the man's expression. Respect, perhaps, mixed with awe. You brought my son back from madness, he said quietly. How? Amara looked at Daniel, her heart aching. I didn't fix him, she said. I just loved him. Daniel stirred, eyes clearer now, though pain still clouded them. You stayed, he murmured, when everyone else ran. Amara smiled through tears. So did you. That afternoon, the truth spilled slowly. Daniel learned of his childhood, his education abroad, the empire waiting for him. Each revelation felt unreal, like someone else's life forced into his hands. By evening, exhaustion weighed heavily on him. I need time, Daniel said finally. I can't go anywhere yet. The man nodded. Take all the time you need. I won't leave. That night, after the visitors had settled in a nearby house, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I'm scared, he admitted softly. Amara turned toward him. Of what? Of losing this, he said. Of becoming someone else and forgetting who I am with you. She placed his hand over her belly. You didn't become whole alone, she said. You won't walk the next part alone either. Tears slipped from Daniel's eyes. For the first time, he understood the truth fully. He had not been healed by wealth. He had not been saved by power. He had been brought back to life by a woman the world had thrown away. And as the black car waited quietly in the darkness, the future, bright, terrifying, and inevitable, stood ready to claim them both. Healing did not happen overnight. Despite the dramatic arrival of the black car and the truth it carried, Daniel did not suddenly become whole the next morning. His mind was clearer than it had ever been, yes, but clarity brought pain. Memories returned unevenly, crashing into him without warning, leaving him shaken and exhausted. The days that followed were filled with long silences and difficult conversations. Daniel's father stayed nearby, careful not to overwhelm him. Doctors arrived. Not the hurried, careless ones Daniel dimly remembered from his past, but patient men and women who spoke softly, who explained every step, who waited for consent before touching him. They examined him slowly, reviewed years of damage done by the wrong medications, and created a treatment plan that focused as much on rest and stability as it did on medicine. Amara stayed by Daniel's side through all of it. Sometimes she sat quietly while doctors spoke words she barely understood. Other times, she held Daniel's hand when his head began to ache, when his breathing changed, when fear crept back into his eyes. "You can stop if it's too much," she would whisper. Daniel always shook his head. "No," he said each time. "I want my life back." But wanting something did not make the process easy. There were days Daniel woke angry. Angry at the past, angry at his father, angry at himself for being broken so easily. On those days he paced outside the hut, fists clenched, muttering under his breath. Amara learned not to interrupt his anger. She would bring him water. She would sit nearby. She would remind him to eat. And slowly, the storms passed quicker each time. One evening, after a particularly difficult session with the doctors, Daniel sat on the step outside the hut, staring at the road as the sun dipped low. "I remember more now," he said quietly. Amara joined him, lowering herself carefully beside him. "Is that good or bad?" He thought for a moment. "Both." He told her about the house he grew up in, large, echoing, filled with staff and rules. He spoke of expectations placed on him from a young age, of being trained to inherit power before he fully understood what power meant. He spoke of betrayal, friends who smiled while plotting, relatives who saw him as an obstacle. "They took everything," he said, his voice tight. "My mind, my name, my future." Amara listened without trying to fix it. "They couldn't take your heart," she said finally. Daniel turned to her, surprised. "You still cared," she continued, "even when you didn't remember who you were. That means they didn't win." Something in Daniel's chest loosened. That night, for the first time, he slept without murmuring. As the weeks passed, Daniel's transformation became undeniable. He spoke with clarity. He remembered dates, faces, places. His posture changed. He stood straighter, moved with intention. The fog that once dulled his expressions lifted, revealing sharp intelligence and quiet authority beneath. The villagers noticed. They whispered openly now. "That man is not mad. He speaks like an educated person." The woman healed him. Some began greeting them respectfully. Others avoided them entirely, unsettled by the change. Daniel noticed too. One afternoon, as they returned from the market, he stopped suddenly and looked around. "They look at us differently," he said. Amara nodded. "They always will." Daniel frowned. "I don't like it." "You don't have to," she replied. "Just don't let it change you." He smiled faintly. "I don't think I can change that much anymore." Then came the decision that frightened Amara the most. "I need to go to the city," Daniel said one morning, his voice steady. "Just for a while." Her heart clenched. She had known this moment would come, but knowing did not make it easier. "With them?" she asked softly, nodding toward where his father waited. "Yes." She looked down at her belly, now heavy and round. Fear pressed against her ribs. "And me?" she asked. Daniel knelt in front of her immediately, taking her hands. "You come with me," he said without hesitation, "or I don't go at all." Tears sprang to Amara's eyes. "Your world is not like this," she whispered. "I don't belong there." Daniel shook his head firmly. "You are my world. Anywhere I stand, you belong." When they arrived in the city, Amara felt like she had stepped into another life. The house Daniel had once lived in was enormous. Too clean, too quiet, too full of people who bowed and spoke carefully. She felt painfully out of place in her simple clothes, her swollen feet, her village accent. Daniel noticed immediately. He stayed close, introduced her proudly. "This is my wife," he said each time. "Amara." Some eyes widened, some mouths tightened, some hid their shock poorly. Daniel did not care. Doctors continued Daniel's treatment there, refining medications, monitoring progress. Each day he grew stronger, more confident, more certain of who he was becoming. One afternoon, during a meeting he attended with his father, something remarkable happened. A man questioned Daniel's presence. "You've been away a long time," the man said cautiously. "Are you sure you're ready to?" Daniel met his gaze calmly. "I survived what you could not imagine," he said. "I healed without your help. I am more than ready." The room fell silent. That was the moment his father truly smiled. Not as a billionaire, but as a proud parent. Amara gave birth shortly after. The labor was long and painful, but Daniel never left her side. He held her hand through every contraction, whispered encouragement, wiped her tears. When the baby finally cried, a strong, healthy sound, Amara sobbed with relief. Daniel held their child with trembling hands, all written across his face. "My family," he whispered. In that moment, Daniel understood something clearly for the first time. Power meant nothing without love. Success meant nothing without loyalty. And healing meant nothing if it cost him the woman who saved him. Days later, he stood before his father and the board of the company. "I will take my place," he said. "But my wife stands beside me. Always." There was no room for argument in his voice. And just like that, the madman who had been cast aside became the heir the world could not ignore. Not because of wealth, but because he chose love first. The city did not welcome Amara gently. It watched her, measured her, judged her. From the moment she stepped into the vast glass building that housed Daniel's father's company, Amara felt every eye slide over her body, lingering too long on her rounded hips, her soft belly that still bore the marks of childbirth, her simple dress that could not hide her village roots. She had lived with judgment her entire life, but this kind was different. It was quieter, polite, sharper. She held her head high anyway. Daniel walked beside her, his hand firm around hers. He no longer moved like a man afraid of himself. His shoulders were straight, his gaze steady, his presence commanding. The scars were still there, but they no longer owned him. As they entered the boardroom, conversation stopped. Men and women in expensive suits turned in their chairs. Some recognized Daniel instantly. Others needed a second look, surprised by how whole he seemed. This was not the broken man they remembered. Daniel took his seat without waiting to be invited. "My father asked me to be here," he said calmly. "So here I am." His father sat at the head of the table, watching carefully. This was not a test of intelligence. It was a test of strength. A man near the far end cleared his throat. "Daniel, we're all glad you're, well, but the company has moved forward in your absence." Daniel nodded. "So have I." The man hesitated. "You've been away for years. With all due respect, this is a multi-billion enterprise. It's not something one simply recovers." Daniel finished quietly. The room went still. "I didn't simply recover," Daniel continued. "I survived deliberate destruction. I was removed because I stood in the way of greed. And while I was gone, some of you benefited." Murmurs rippled through the room. Amara felt Daniel's grip tighten slightly, not from fear, but resolve. "I'm not here to beg for a seat," Daniel said. "I'm here to reclaim what was stolen." The man leaned back. "And what exactly qualifies you to do that?" Daniel turned to Amara. Every eye followed his movement. "This woman," he said, his voice steady, "found me when I had nothing. No power, no name, no sanity. She stood by me when there was no reward to be gained." Some people shifted uncomfortably. "She didn't know who I was," he continued. "She didn't care. She healed me without medicine. She reminded me who I was when I had forgotten myself." Daniel turned back to the table. "If I can survive that," he said, "I can run this company." Silence followed. Then Daniel's father spoke. My son will assume executive authority effective immediately. A chair scraped loudly as someone stood. That's outrageous, a man barked. This is emotional decision-making, not business. Daniel met his gaze coolly. You falsified documents during my absence. I have copies. The man froze. Another tried to speak. You rerouted funds through a shell account, Daniel said calmly. I have those records too. One by one, names were called. Secrets exposed. Faces drained of color. By the end of the meeting, 3 board members were escorted out. Amara sat silently through it all, her heart pounding. Not from fear, but awe. She was watching justice happen. Later that day, Daniel stood in his new office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Amara stood near the doorway, unsure if she belonged in such a place. Daniel noticed immediately. Come here, he said softly. She walked to him. He took her hands. You don't look comfortable. She smiled faintly. This world is loud. He chuckled. It used to be louder inside my head. She laughed quietly, then grew serious. They don't respect me. Daniel's expression hardened. Not with anger, but certainty. They will, he said. Because I do. Word spread quickly. The story of Daniel's return became legend. Media outlets buzzed. Investors leaned in. Enemies panicked. And alongside every headline about Daniel's rise was a quieter curiosity. Who is the woman beside him? Amara felt it everywhere. At charity events, meetings, gatherings she never imagined she would attend. People smiled politely, but their eyes always asked the same question. How did someone like you end up here? At first, Amara shrank under it. She chose seats in corners. She spoke softly. She let Daniel handle everything. But one afternoon, something changed. They were attending a foundation meeting when a woman approached Amara directly. You must be very lucky, the woman said, her smile tight. Marrying into wealth like this. Amara studied her calmly. I didn't marry wealth, she replied. I married a man everyone else threw away. The woman blinked, startled. Amara continued, her voice steady. If luck exists, it was in choosing each other when nothing else existed. The woman said nothing more. Daniel watched from across the room, pride swelling in his chest. That evening, Daniel and Amara stood on the balcony of their home, the city glowing below. Do you regret it? Amara asked quietly. This life. Daniel turned to her. Do you? She thought of her aunt's kitchen. The insults. The loneliness. No, she said. But sometimes I fear forgetting where I came from. Daniel smiled gently. Then we'll remember together. Amara placed her hand over his chest. Promise me something. Anything. When we return to the village, she said slowly. We don't go back for revenge. Daniel considered this. What do we go back for? Truth, she said. Let them see what kindness created. Daniel nodded. Then we go in daylight. That night, as Amara lay beside her sleeping child, she finally understood something powerful. She had not escaped poverty by chance. She had not risen because of beauty or luck. She had risen because she chose love when the world taught her cruelty. And now, standing beside the man who once had nothing, she was no longer an orphan. She was a wife, a mother, a force the world had underestimated. And the village that once buried her in shame would soon witness the cost of that mistake. The road to Umudike had not changed. Red earth still stretched endlessly beneath the sun, scarred by potholes and years of neglect. Palm trees still leaned lazily to one side, their shadows cutting jagged shapes into the dust. Children still chased old bicycle tires barefoot, laughter ringing through the heat. What had changed was the car. It moved like something unreal, sleek, black, polished to a mirror shine. Its engine purred softly, swallowing the sound of the road beneath it. As it approached the village, heads began to turn. At first, people only stared. Cars like that did not come to Umudike. Then whispers started. Who is that? Did someone die? Is it government people? The car slowed as it crossed the familiar boundary. the spot where Amara used to balance heavy buckets of water on her head, where she had once been grabbed, dragged, broken. Inside the car, Amara's hands trembled. Daniel noticed immediately. "We can turn back," he said gently. "Anytime." She shook her head slowly. "No," she replied. "I've been running my whole life. Today, I walk back in." Daniel squeezed her hand, admiration and love shining in his eyes. The car rolled deeper into the village. Someone dropped a basket of tomatoes. Another woman froze mid-gossip, her mouth hanging open. Children stopped running. Chickens scattered. The car finally stopped, directly in front of Aunt Ngozie's compound. Silence fell like a heavy cloth. The gate creaked open slowly. Uncle Felix stepped out first, wiping his hands on his wrapper, irritation already on his face. "What kind of nonsense car is blocking my—" His voice died in his throat, because the first person to step out was Amara. Not the Amara he remembered. She stood tall, calm, dressed simply but elegantly. Her body was still full, still soft, but now it carried dignity, not shame. Her hair was neatly styled. Her face held no fear. Behind her, Daniel stepped out, confident, immaculately dressed, powerful in a way that made the air around him seem tighter. Then the driver opened the back door and gently handed Amara her baby. The world stopped. Aunt Ngozi staggered out of the house, drawn by the sudden stillness. Her eyes landed on Amara and widened in disbelief. For a moment no one spoke. Then Aunt Ngozi laughed nervously. "Amara?" she said uncertainly. "Is that you?" Amara looked at her for a long, quiet moment. "Yes," she said. "It's me." Villagers gathered quickly now, forming a loose circle around the compound. Curiosity burned hotter than fear. Uncle Felix found his voice again. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, though his tone lacked its former authority. Daniel stepped forward. "My wife has come home," he said calmly. The word wife rippled through the crowd like thunder. Someone gasped. Another whispered, "Isn't that the madman?" Daniel turned slowly, his gaze sharp but controlled. "I was never mad," he said. "I was poisoned and abandoned." Eyes widened. Amara stepped forward then, cradling her child. Her voice was steady, but each word carried weight. "You sent me away because I was pregnant," she said, looking directly at Aunt Ngozi. "You called me a disgrace. You said no one would want me." Aunt Ngozi's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "You gave me to a man you called mad," Amara continued. "You thought you were burying me." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But you planted me." A murmur rose through the crowd. Uncle Felix scoffed weakly. "This is drama. Who is this man anyway?" Daniel smiled, not kindly. "My name is Daniel," he said, "and I am the son of the man who owns the largest manufacturing company in this country." The words landed like a blow. People staggered backward. Someone screamed, "Jesus!" Aunt Ngozi collapsed onto a stool, her legs giving way beneath her. Daniel continued calmly, "Your cruelty did not destroy me, saved me, because it brought me to her." He gestured to Amara. "And because of her," he said, "I am alive, I am whole, and I have returned to take what was stolen from me." The village was completely silent now. Amara stepped closer to her aunt. "I came back for one reason," she said. "Not revenge." Aunt Ngozi looked up, trembling. "Amara, my daughter." Amara's eyes softened, but her voice did not. "I was never your daughter," she said. "I was your servant." Tears streamed down Aunt Ngozi's face. "We made mistakes." "Yes," Amara agreed. "You did." She reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Uncle Felix. "This money is for the years I worked without pay," she said. "For the hunger, for the pain, for the child you tried to erase." Uncle Felix stared at the envelope, hands shaking. "I forgive you," Amara said quietly. "But forgiveness does not mean access." She turned to the crowd. "I want every girl here to hear me," she said. "Your worth is not decided by who mistreats you. Your body is not a punishment. Your kindness is not weakness. Women wept openly. Some bowed their heads in shame. Amara lifted her child slightly. This is my family, she said. And this village will never touch us again. Daniel opened the car door. As Amara stepped back inside, she paused one last time and looked around. The same road. The same houses. But she was no longer the same girl. The engine started. As the car pulled away, the village remained frozen, staring at the dust settling behind it, finally understanding the truth too late. The fat orphan they discarded had returned as a woman they could never ignore. And nothing in Umidike would ever be the same again. The village of Umidike did not recover quickly. Long after the black car disappeared into the distance, dust still hung in the air, clinging to roofs and memories. People stood where they were for a long time, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to move forward after witnessing something that rearranged everything they thought they understood about life. For years, Umidike had believed in one truth. Power belonged to those who crushed others first. That day, they learned how wrong they were. Aunt Ngozi did not sleep that night. She sat on her bed staring at the wall, the echoes of Amara's calm voice replaying again and again in her mind. Not the anger she had expected. Not curses. Not threats. Just truth. Uncle Felix tried to drink the shame away, but palm wine could not dull the sound of villagers whispering behind his back. For the first time he felt small, exposed, measured by the very cruelty he had once enjoyed. In the weeks that followed, Umidike spoke of nothing else. The madman was never mad. She healed him. She forgave them, and still walked away. Some praised Amara openly. Others felt uneasy, as though her success accused them personally. But no one denied what they had seen. And far away from the village that once defined her pain, Amara slept peacefully. Their return to the city was quiet. No press. No celebration. Just the soft hum of the road and the steady breathing of her child in the back seat. That night, as rain tapped gently against the windows of their home, Amara stood at the balcony, staring into the distance. Daniel joined her, wrapping a light shawl around her shoulders. "You were brave today," he said softly. She shook her head. "I was tired of being afraid." He smiled. "That's braver." She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. "Do you think I was too kind?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. "No," he said finally. "You were strong. Kindness that still has boundaries is strength." Amara closed her eyes. For the first time, she felt truly finished with the past. Life settled into a new rhythm. Daniel officially took full control of the company, restructuring departments, removing corruption with precision rather than cruelty. Those who had benefited from his disappearance were exposed, not with drama, but with undeniable evidence. Power shifted quietly but permanently. Amara chose a different path. While Daniel handled boardrooms and negotiations, she began to build something of her own. It started with a question she asked one evening while feeding their child. "What happens to girls like me?" she asked. Daniel looked at her. "What do you mean?" "The ones no one protects," she said. "The ones people throw away because it's easier than caring." Daniel understood immediately. Within a year, the Amara Foundation was born. It was not flashy. It did not chase headlines. It focused on girls, orphans, abused children, pregnant teenagers abandoned by family. It provided shelter, education, medical care, and something far rarer, dignity. Amara visited often. She sat with the girls, ate with them, listened. She never introduced herself as a billionaire's wife. She introduced herself as someone who survived. One afternoon, a young girl asked her quietly, "Auntie, does it ever stop hurting?" Amara knelt in front of her, meeting her eyes. "Yes," she said, "but only when you learn that what happened to you was not your fault." The girl cried into her arms. Daniel watched moments like that from a distance, his love for Amara deepening into something unshakable. He had rebuilt an empire, but she was rebuilding lives, and somehow her work felt greater. Years passed. Their child grew strong and curious, surrounded by warmth and laughter. Daniel became known not just as a powerful businessman, but as a fair one. Amara became known not for her past, but for her impact. One day, a letter arrived from Umudike. Amara recognized the handwriting immediately. Aunt Ngozi. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The letter was short. No excuses. No demands. Just an apology. Amara read it once, then twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in a drawer. She did not write back. Some closures did not require response. Instead, she returned to Umudike quietly months later, not in a luxury convoy, not announced. This time she came to build. A school rose where weeds once grew. A health center followed. Scholarships were created for girls whose names reminded Amara of herself. The villagers watched with humility this time. No one mocked, and no one laughed. When a young woman approached Amara one afternoon and said, "Because of you, I didn't give up," Amara knew she had truly come full circle. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky gold, Amara and Daniel stood together watching children play in the schoolyard. "Do you ever wonder?" Daniel asked quietly. "What would have happened if they had been kind to you?" Amara thought for a long moment. "Yes," she said. "But then I realize, if they had been, I might never have become this." She turned to him. "And I might never have found you." Daniel took her hand. Their story had begun in cruelty. It had survived silence. It had grown through patience. And it had ended in purpose. Amara was no longer the fat orphan. No longer the discarded girl. No longer the woman defined by what was done to her. She was a wife. A mother. A builder of futures. And the world that once tried to erase her now bore her fingerprints everywhere it looked. This was not a fairy tale. It was better. It was real. And it proved one final truth. Sometimes, the ones the world breaks become the ones who teach it how to heal. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to this channel and tell us where you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.